in my research, if you're a size zero will attract you. But for the 98% of women that are not a size zero, they'd like to see a model that's reflective of their age and also of their size. I was working in the industry and saw that most fashion brands were using one type of model, a tall, young, thin, Caucasian model. But in fact, I saw that some fashion brands were having success by using different types of models and models that were more reflective of their consumer. And so I wanted to investigate what type of model was actually going to be more effective in a fashion advertisement. The conclusion's very interesting. Because I compared North America to China, I found very different results. And I think that makes sense because both cultures are very different. In North America, I found the practice of only using a model who reflects the Western beauty ideal to be ineffective. In fact, women respond to models more favorably, increase purchase intentions when the model mirrors their size, their age, and their race. But if we jump to China, I found that younger Chinese women actually increased purchase intentions when they saw an idealized Western model. Older Chinese consumers actually had much more varied purchase intentions. Some responded favorably to Chinese models. Others were cautious of fashion advertising in general, regardless of the model type. I think it's important to realize when you think of this relationship between models, women, and self-esteem, that women aren't duped by culture. More than anything, it's because all there is in this media environment is this one idealized image of beauty. And so over time, people internalize that and think that is the standard of beauty and then inevitably will compare themselves to them. And in fact, most academic research looks at the relationship between models and self-esteem, but nothing looks at the impact of purchase intentions and skepticism and other consumer behavior variables. And it's quite funny when you think about it because fashion is a business. And so ultimately, what the industry is concerned about is what type of model is going to increase purchase intentions, is going to resonate with my consumer target market. Well, I think one of the most interesting findings from my research is this new idea that I brought out of aspiration. And whenever people talk about fashion advertising, they always say that women want to aspire to the model in the advertisement, that advertising that's the most effective in the fashion industry sells this idea of aspiration. But no research had really looked at what does aspiration mean. And one of the things I found is that actually there's two key components of aspiration. One is actually the physical traits of the model, so if you think those physical traits are something you aspire towards. And second is a concept I called creative direction. And that has to do with the photography, the hair and makeup, the actual clothes, all of the fashion of the advertisement. And what I found that simply using a model who reflects the consumer is not enough to motivate purchase intentions. You have to use a model who reflects the consumer in North America, but that model also has to reflect the glamour, the artistry, the creativity of fashion. So women, regardless of the type of model they aspire towards, want to aspire to that fashion image, that creativity, that glamour, and that artistry. North American women generally will increase purchase intentions. They aspire to a model who looks like them, so their size, their age, their racial background. Chinese women right now, the younger demographic, aspire to a model who reflects the Western beauty ideal. But I think it's really important that to recognize that there's so much transition in China right now that what we found with the younger Chinese women may change in 2 years or 5 years down the road. In fact, some members in my younger Chinese sample were resistant to models that reflected the Western beauty ideal and actually increased purchase intentions when they saw Chinese models because it was enhancing to see a model who looked like them, and also they wanted to maintain their Chinese cultural heritage. So I think brands need to be cautious of what they're doing in China and of my recommendations because they're temporary, because there's so much transition in that economy. The idea in the industry of selling fashion is that you want to cast a model that nobody looks like because women will buy that outfit in order to look like the model. Of course, they never will. They'll feel badly about themselves, but they'll continue to buy that product in the hope of actually being able to look like that model. So what you're doing is you're fueling demand by creating insecurity. What I found is in North America, that's no longer effective. In fact, when the majority of the women in my sample saw models who reflected the Western beauty ideal, one, they were either really frustrated because they knew they could never look like that. They were savvy and skeptical and really thought that image was not realistic and was not attainable. And other women felt insulted. They felt insulted that the industry was telling them that they needed to look like that that was the definition of beauty. And so I found that actually trying to hurt women's self-esteem doesn't increase purchase intentions. What increases purchase intentions is raising their confidence, making them feel beautiful. And by seeing a model who actually reflected the consumer, women could picture themselves in the outfit, they felt beautiful, and they wanted to express that by buying the advertised item. The idea is that with fashion, you want to sell a dream. You want to sell something that consumers can fantasize about. But what that fantasy is, that fashion fantasy, isn't the same for every consumer age group and isn't the same for every consumer culture. And so it's really important that fashion brands understand their target market. First of all, the culture of that target market and the mindset, and also the age group. So what age are they trying to target? And then select models accordingly. The hope is that this research will start to change industry practice. So we'll start to get fashion marketers and marketers in general to reconsider their approach of only casting a model who reflects the Western beauty ideal, and instead start to cast models in North America that reflect their audience, or in China, being more cautious, that realizing that idealized model might only be temporarily effective. And in fact, they have to really research that market and stay on top of that market to understand the transition in consumer attitudes.